My name is Dale Mason. I'm a retired homicide detective. I retired after 30 years of service. As far as I was concerned, being assigned to homicide was the best job in the business. It was a Tuesday, and it was a regular work day for me.
Oh, babe, I think I'm gonna turn on in.
I worked a shift during the day.
The phone rings, and he instinctively knows who it is.
Mason.
It's not a friend. It's work.
Where?
You can feel it when they call.
It would always be someone that outranked you.
I'm on my way.
And it would always be a situation where you had to go from 0 to 60 immediately.
Well, looks like I gotta go to work.
When those calls come in, there's a certain urgency by the caller, and you're supposed to immediately go there, bail out of an aircraft at low altitude, and somehow resolve this before you hit the ground.
No one detective solves a homicide. It's a team effort. You have to draw on all the experience of anyone that's willing to help you.
Is Detective Hooper here yet?
Yeah, he's over in the garage.
When Mason arrives at the residence where this occurred, he's shown into the crime scene by a uniformed officer who points out the victim.
I recall that the victim was on the floor of the kitchen. He had what appeared to be a single gunshot wound to the chest.
So what do we know so far?
Married, a couple kids. Wife said he just got home from work.
He's a pharmacist by trade. He owns several drugstores in Carson, California, more of a working class, tough kind of neighborhood. But he lives in Huntington Beach and travels back and forth to work. One of the detectives assigned to the case by Mason is Detective Richard Hooper.
I think I got something.
Hooper has discovered a briefcase. Mason gets down on one knee and looks in this briefcase, and it's filled with cash. Now, that's interesting.
How much do you think's in there?
I don't know.
I was informed sometime later that there was $30,000 in cash in the briefcase.
Now, why is a pharmacist traveling around with 30 grand in his briefcase? He is a pharmacist, which means he can buy Schedule I narcotics. The question becomes, what is your work, Franklin? And what are you doing with this much cash? The other question is, why is it still there? Why not take the money? Well, the answer is they either don't know about the money or they panic after they shoot him.
You need evidence?
I have no idea who the suspect could be. It could be a neighbor, it could be the wife. It's a mistake to focus too soon on a particular suspect. So then you get tunnel vision and you start looking for evidence that tends to incriminate someone rather than just trying to find the truth.
Anything else interesting?
Not really. Haven't found any casings.
The fact that there are no shell casings told me the weapon used was a revolver.
Most people in 1989 had revolvers, where the casing is retained in the cylinder after the round has been fired.
I had a great opportunity to work with Detective Dale Mason. He is one of the best detectives dealing with homicide cases that I ever met in Orange County. Detective Mason will generally just eyeball the crime scene. After he accumulates enough information, he will start talking with individuals
Meet you back at the station.
that were actually at the crime scene.
First off, I want to tell you I'm sorry for your loss.
And Mason is careful when he approaches her. He doesn't want to alarm her or make her believe that somehow he is suspicious of her or even suspicious of her husband. He opens up with the standard line of questioning. So tell me about Franklin.
He's 43 years old. He's originally from China.
The victim had immigrated from China. He owned and operated at least 2 pharmacies in Los Angeles.
Of course, the 70s were really pivotal years, and during that time, we had a lot of immigration from Southeast Asia, for instance. A lot of those people came to California.
And he really liked Los Angeles, but we've just always been more comfortable living in Huntington Beach.
It was not unusual at all for families to live like in the suburban communities of Orange County and work in downtown Los Angeles.
She says he worked in a bad neighborhood filled with other immigrants, and they all loved him because they saw him as a brother, that he too was an immigrant to the United States, just like them.
He was a very kind individual that really wanted to help his community.
This crime, when it happened, must have been an absolute shock to the community because it would have been so unusual. He had a pharmacy up in the Carson area, and he was an important person in that community.
They weren't customers, they were his friends. Mr. Ewan allowed them to come to his location with a check, and he would cash it.
And it finally strikes Mason. It's the 31st of January. It's the end of the month. People get paid by the end of the month. He has that much money because he is prepared to cash people's checks.
He had a ton of cash on him all the time. That's when I convinced him to hire security guards.
He hired licensed security guards, but he didn't go through an agency. If you were licensed and matched a certain image and could be intimidating, I think he would hire you.
So he therefore would use them to protect him when he had that kind of money. When he would drive home, they were instructed to follow him to a certain exit. Then he would get off at that exit off the freeway and proceed to his house a short distance away, but they weren't permitted to follow him, so even they would know where he lived.
Victim didn't trust the security guards 100%.
So that gives Mason something to go on. Who are these people, and do they connect to this crime in some way?
Well, thank you for coming in.
Because he believes Mrs. Yuen is not part of this.
When I was assigned a homicide case, the moment I got the phone call, I made up my mind right then and there. I was going to do everything legally possible to solve that murder.
Homicide investigation is not a sprint, it's a marathon. But the day continues, and it just continues as long as it needs to.
At 9:30 in the morning, I'm at the autopsy.
What do you have for me?
Pathologists ruled that it was a homicide and the cause of death was a gunshot wound to the heart.
Looks like a 38 or a 357 Magnum.
This is a close contact gunshot wound because of stippling and tattooing. It's a phrase applied by medical examiners to describe burning and discoloration of the skin at the point of entry of a gunshot wound. The burning and the discoloration and bruising of the skin is a result of gas, flame, and unburned particles of powder exiting the muzzle of a gun when a bullet is fired. So someone is very close. The bullet size in those two are the same. The difference is the amount of propulsion.
Now that we had the bullet, if and when we found the murder weapon, we could do a comparison.
You mind if I use your phone?
There's certain characteristics of the bullet as it comes out of the gun that creates a unique look.
Mason tells Hooper to meet him over at Ewan's pharmacy to see what they can learn from his employees.
Okay.
I started to form the opinion early on, one, that the suspect was someone that had inside information.
We'd like to ask you a few questions about your boss.
I thought there was a high probability that one of the security guards was involved.
My name's Lester Hicks.
Lester Hicks is the security guard assigned to protect Franklin UN.
The guy you need to talk to is Danny Mosley.
He was very cooperative.
It's kind of his right-hand man the past few months.
Do you know where Mr. Mosley is right now?
No idea.
Lester says he just kind of disappeared. He didn't show up for work one day and nobody's seen him since.
That dude was wild.
How so?
He talked about how you should rip Mr. Ewan off because he had all his money.
He said that this security guard had a plan to rob the victim.
Now, Mason's eyes and ears perk up when he hears that. Here's a guy, Lester Hicks, saying out loud that Danny Mosley, the long-term security guard, has mentioned robbing Franklin UN. No, that's interesting.
All right, Mr. Hicks, thanks.
Well, Mr. Mosley, why did you disappear? Putting your final touches on the plan to rob and kill Mr. UN? I think we better find out. Detective Mason's first step in trying to find Mosley is to run him through their systems.
I'm looking for some information on a Danny Mosley.
Well, that hits pay dirt almost immediately. Danny Mosley's in jail. So he's going to be awfully easy to locate. He's in a federal lockup facility in Los Angeles. Mason contacts the field office of the FBI, so what's up with Danny Mosley? And they explain that Danny Mosley is the leader of a stick-up crew. They are ambitious, they are busy, and they are dangerous.
About the date.
Mosley had been arrested for committing several robberies. We were able to confirm that Mosley was in custody on the night of the murder.
So now Mosley has a great alibi, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have a Confederate who robbed UN on his behalf.
See, I don't think he's gonna talk.
The FBI says Mosley's hardcore, and he won't talk to him, period, the end.
He's a real tough guy.
Mason says, yeah, I figured that, but I want to plant a seed with him and see if it grows.
I was hoping that we could shake Mosley up, make him nervous, and maybe get him to communicate with someone about any knowledge that he might have concerning the murder of our victim.
Who the hell are you? I ain't got nothing to say to you.
That's okay, Danny, because I just need you to listen.
Dale Mason is just very straightforward. You don't see him laughing and being jovial. He's just got this straight line approach, but it's very, very effective.
We told him that we knew that he was involved in the murder of our victim, and that sooner or later we'd be back to pick him up.
Guard!
Mason is aware that criminals are very evasive, easily frightened, and if you convince them that you know something, they're going to panic. So Mason waits. He knows it will happen because Mosley's got nothing else to do. He's in jail. Nothing to occupy his time except his own fear. It takes 2 weeks in Mosley's case. Two weeks before he calls anybody. Their calls are recorded. They are told that. So criminals believe, because they're smart guys, that they'll just speak in code and their friends will know what they mean.
No, I need you to do something for me.
And they're correct. Their friends know what it means. And so do the police, for heaven's sake.
No, I need you to do something for me.
My partner and I listened to all the telephone calls that were being made where Mosley was being housed.
I need you to get rid of my baby. You understand?
All right, I got you.
Mosley is talking to another male subject, and he's asking him to get rid of something.
Get rid of my baby.
But he's referring to this something as his baby.
All right, yeah.
All right.
Well, you don't get rid of babies, but you do get rid of objects.
It was obviously something he was trying to either destroy or conceal in some manner.
Now, what object could that be?
My guess, that's our weapon.
All they have is a phone number. They have no idea who Mosley was speaking with. They have a number that the person was called at.
I wonder if he ever visited Mosley in jail.
With visitation procedures, the person visiting has to document his or her name, an address, and a telephone number. When the call is made from the dormitory, the number being called is also documented.
Enjoy.
I think I got something here. Gerald Jennings.
So he goes to the logs, and there's the name and address of the guy he called.
That's cool.
He runs a background on this kid, and he's not what he thinks he should be.
He was a young man. He was a student at UCLA. He didn't have a criminal record. He'd never been arrested or anything like that. We obtained a search warrant. Once we were in place, I telephoned this individual and told him that I had been in the detention center with Mosley as a fellow inmate,
Oh, hey, man. It's Danny's friend again.
and that Mosley had asked me to contact him
I'm about to head your way.
to pick up his gun. I wasn't sure what he was going to do. I was hoping he would get the gun and leave the residence.
Mason's ploy works. Jennings panics when he gets that phone call and immediately leaves the house. And he's carrying something when he gets in the car.
Suspects on the move.
Put your hands where I can see them. Do it now. Step out slowly. Keep your hands where I can see them.
We stopped him,
Gerald Jennings, we have a search warrant for your car.
executed the search warrant.
You got him?
Got it.
And we found the .357 Magnum in the car.
Mason is somewhat elated. Now he has a gun of the proper caliber in the hands of a known Confederate to Mosley. Is it the murder weapon? And is Jennings the killer? Well, we're going to have to see. Detective Dale Mason is on the hunt for the murderer of Franklin Ewan, a pharmacist with a young family from Huntington Beach, California. Mason takes Jennings to his headquarters and locks him in an interrogation room and personally carries the gun to ballistics for examination. So now he's proceeding quickly to answer both questions. Is it the gun, and is it the guy?
I was very hopeful that we had recovered the gun that was used in the murder, but I needed ballistics experts to confirm that for me.
Y'all mind telling me what's going on?
Jennings initially wants to play bad guy.
I mean, you have no right to kick me.
He's saying all the bad guy things, but he doesn't mean it.
Well, you know you're not here for nothing.
He had a kind of a smug attitude, as though he was above it all.
We're investigating a murder.
Mason sees through the bravado to cover the fear.
I told him we were investigating the murder, and that as far as I knew, the weapon that was taken out of his car was the weapon that was used in the murder.
If you don't cooperate, we're gonna bring you down for murder.
When I told him that I thought that he had possession of a gun that was used in the murder, that got his attention.
And now Jennings looks like he's going to have a coronary.
I'll be back.
And Mason gets up and leaves. He just wanders down to ballistics to see the good news.
Oh, hey. Bad news, I'm afraid.
You're kidding.
It's not your gun.
And it's not good news.
Are you absolutely sure?
Positive.
The gun didn't match. That just, in my mind, didn't diminish the odds that we would ever recover the weapon.
Homicide is always a series of problems. So now we got to go back to Jennings in the hope that maybe he can clear this up in some way. Jennings is frantic. He begins to just literally start running his mouth.
So how do you know Mosley? I've known him since we were kids.
He and Mosley grew up in the same neighborhood.
When he called me from jail.
He tells Mason that he worked at not being a criminal, but he maintained a certain loyalty and friendship with Mosley.
I didn't shoot anybody. That gun never left my house.
And he's almost to the point of tears. And Mason sees a certain amount of honesty in that he's probably truthful, that he just kept it for Mosley.
I got nothing to do with this.
If you didn't use it to kill anyone, who did?
He was trying to tell us everything that he knew about the members of the robbery crew.
Danny ran with a bunch of guys. They didn't do just banks.
He told us that he was aware that the crew had robbed the Queen Mary and the credit union at the Long Beach Naval Shipyard.
Mosley told Jennings all about running this robbery crew and bragged to him about the crimes. Mosley trusted him as a lifelong friend. So then Cooper hits this kid with a $64 question.
This crew, this Mosley crew.
Got a name? Give us something.
There's this one guy,
He knew the names of some of the crew members.
Michael.
He told us about one in particular.
He had an Italian last name.
The subject had recently left California and returned to Cleveland, Ohio.
Benicio. Michael Benicio.
He said his name is Michael Benicio. He was part of that crew. He was in all the robberies.
See? Now that wasn't so hard, was it?
Can I go now?
Yes. Yes, you can.
I felt in my gut that we were headed in the right direction.
Mason is doing what all homicide detectives do. One foot in front of the other, one crumb to the next crumb. Where is that going to lead him? Mason knows it will lead me wherever it must.
I got a name I want to run by you. Michael Benicio? Is he in jail right now?
We learned that Michael, since returning to Cleveland, had been arrested for robbery.
Oh, he's out.
Benicio makes bond, but he's bonded by his parents who put up their house to get him out of jail. So he knows if he bails or runs, the parents lose their home. He's not going to do that. So he's going to stay in Cleveland, and they know where.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
I thought it was critical to get to Cleveland as soon as possible. Sometimes timing is everything. We needed to get to Michael while the door was open, while the opportunity was there.
Mason won't back off. He'll go to Cleveland. He'll go to Mars if he has to. It's time to confront Michael and find out what he knows. Mason and Hooper contact Benicio's attorney to see if he's willing to talk to them.
Now, this meeting is all contingent on my client.
To their surprise, Benicio's lawyer is very interested in cooperating.
We met Michael at his attorney's office. We learned that Michael was in Cleveland at the time of the murder. That was as good of an alibi as you can get. But I believe at the time that Michael wasn't directly involved in the murder of the victim.
Why don't you tell us about the crews you were running with in California?
Because Michael's looking at a significant sentence for robbery. He was hoping by helping us that he would get a reduced sentence.
Then I went back to Cleveland.
Michael was very personable, likable. He told us about being involved in this robbery crew.
We made a lot of money.
He says these guys are marching right along, making a lot of money, and Mosley's the brains.
Then he got arrested.
When Mosley gets arrested, the crew falls apart. They don't have a leader.
We were hoping you could shed some light on a murder that happened back in Huntington Beach.
I told Michael,
we think a 357 was involved.
We believe that a 357 Magnum was involved.
I had a gun like that.
Michael volunteered to me that he had owned a 357 Magnum when he was participating in this robbery crew in Southern California.
I gave it to a guy.
Benicio tells them he didn't want to travel across state lines with that gun, so he gave it to a Confederate, a guy who was also a member of the stick-up crew, whose name was Willie Linton Hall. Mr. Hall told Benicio he would keep his gun for him until he returned from visiting his parents.
Willie's a bit crazy, you know?
Michael told me that Hall was the kind of person that can actually commit the murder.
Benicio says Hall probably did that murder because he's crazy enough to do that. And Mosley had talked to him about this pharmacist that always had a lot of money.
What makes you so sure Willie Hall's the guy?
One word. Money.
He goes on to say that Hall is probably worried, now that the crew has broken up, that his income is going away. So Hall probably struck out on his own using the gun provided to him by Mr. Benicio.
I can call him if you want. Not yet.
At this point, I'm starting to feel that we're at a very critical junction in this investigation. The next few steps I make better be the right ones.
Dale Mason is a person that knows what he's doing. He has a plan. He's very methodical, very calculating, and thorough.
Superiors criticize me for being slow. Their criticism was of absolutely no importance to me. I was going to work the case my way.
Mason doesn't care about pleasing his bosses. All he wants is justice. Mason and his partner make their next move.
We developed a plan to have Michael released into our custody.
Mason and Hooper are putting themselves on the line with this because they're obligating themselves to a judge in Ohio that Mr. Benicio is not going to escape and that they will return him to Ohio when required.
We had the FBI, we had Michael's attorney, we had the local district attorney. Well, they were all on the same page. And so the judge was very cooperative.
So off they go to California. The plan is for Benicio to call Hall and invite him out to lunch.
Hey, Willie, it's Benicio.
We wanted him to drive to a location that would take a considerable amount of time to get there so that he and Hall would have an opportunity to talk.
Detective Mason's a smart guy. He understands you don't just bring up a subject of a murder in 6 blocks. He tells him, pick a place that's several miles away so you have ample time to get around to Mr. UN.
Okay, I'll pick you up around noon.
So Benicio makes the call.
Don't forget the gun, huh?
Mr. Hall agrees to go all the way across town with Benicio to go have lunch.
We wired the car for sound and recording. We set up a major surveillance team. We had a lot of risk involved.
If something goes wrong, Hall could kill him right then and there. He's got a gun with him. It's Benicio's gun, but so what? It's still a gun.
Want to run through it one last time?
There is some preparation involved here.
The main thing is,
Detective Mason, in general, would talk to the individual about the parameters of how you can talk to him, what you could say and what you can't say or do.
Ready to do this?
And that it would be legal and upheld in a court of law.
Now, when Mason sets up this plan, does he know that Hall is the one, as Hall is the shooter? Maybe. The only guy that knows is Hall. And you're relying on a fellow criminal, Benicio, to elicit that information. It's another step by step, and Hall happens to be the next step. So off they go, and Benicio goes to Hall's apartment and picks him up. So they're in the car, Benicio and Hall.
Where the hell you been at?
Reliving old times.
Remember the run at the Navy Yard? We almost hit them cops on the way out.
As 2 buddies who also happen to be bandits.
Yeah, that one was close.
Benicio finally looks at Hall and says,
What happened to that guy? You know, the pharmacist?
hey, whatever happened to that, that pharmacist dude? The one that had all of the money. That mostly was his guard for a while.
Did you end up robbing him?
I tried to rob the dude. Dude wouldn't give me the briefcase. So, I blasted him.
And he says, yeah, I tried to rob him, but he wasn't giving me the briefcase, so I blasted the.
Oh, my. Guess what? No more investigation. Now it's laser focus on Willie Linton Hall.
Did you end up robbing him?
So after this light conversation between bandits, Hall looked at him and smiled and said, I blasted that.
I blasted him.
So now Mr. Hall has just confessed to a murder on tape in front of a witness.
Hall goes into some detail. He talks about surveilling him.
I was watching him.
He tells Benicio his income is falling apart. There is no more work without Danny Mosley. So now what? And Hall remembers the pharmacist.
I knew he had the money, and I needed it.
Hall had the license plate number of the victim's car. He knew a police dispatcher.
Hey, girl.
So he went to her and told her a sob story about being the victim of a hit and run.
Yeah, I got the dude's license plate number.
He says he just wants to see this guy and settle it like men between he and this person and get his car fixed.
It's 4V.
Can she run a license plate for him
056
and give him the guy's address? And this woman agrees to it, believing his story, apparently. She provides him with registration information and the address of Franklin Yuen.
Hey, thank you.
I felt sorry for the dispatcher.
I'll talk to you later, all right?
She was a young woman, and she was fairly new on the job, and I felt like Hall had just taken advantage of her, and as a result, she ended up getting arrested and losing her job. When Hall's talking to Michael, he's like fun and games. He's jovial.
Oh, man.
Hall is proud of himself that he's so clever with this plan.
Yeah, that was good.
Detective Mason and Detective Hooper are listening to it in progress as it moves along. They're going to wait until they get every word they can out of this story before they stop that car. Hall tells Benicio that the night of the shooting, he drives to that house and finds no place to hide. So he decides that he has to climb a tree, which is almost something out of a cartoon, but that's what he does. And he waits for Yuen to come home. Yuen comes in the driveway, pulls in the garage. Hall drops out of the tree and goes into the garage to confront him.
Daddy!
Hey, sweetie, hold on. Let me put these boxes down.
Hall says that he confronted him in the garage.
What are you doing? Briefcase, hand it over.
Demanded the briefcase.
When he confronts him,
Briefcase, I want it. Hand it over.
What do you want? Give
it to me.
Get out of my house.
something goes wrong. But Hall says, I panicked and I shot him.
God damn it.
What is going on in here?
Then I heard people inside, and I just ran. A typical armed robbery scenario. When panic happens, the gunfire tends to begin.
Dad! Franklin! Wake up! Mom, go call someone!
Did you get the money?
Nah, it just took off.
He kills him for nothing. He panics, he pulls the trigger, he ends Franklin Yuen's life, and he derives $0.00.
LAPD, keep your hands where we can see them. See your hands.
We called in LAPD, had them stop the car. We took Michael and Willie Hall into custody. That's the best feeling in the world. We just made our case. We got a suspect in custody.
Mr. Benicio is granted his deal and winds up doing 10 years in prison in Ohio. Mr. Hall is taken to trial for first-degree murder and given the overwhelming evidence in the case. The jury has no difficulty finding him guilty.
When you hear the defendant basically admitting why he did it, that's compelling. I think that went a large way towards the jury finding Willie Hall guilty. This is an aggravating crime because it's one where Mr. Hall had a gun going into the crime, trying to take money from an innocent individual at his home. And when the attempt to get the money was unsuccessful, in a way, gratuitously shot and killed Mr. Ewan. So this is a pretty aggravating crime of murder while in the commission of a robbery. And this certainly is an aggravating factor because of the callousness of the crime itself.
Once he was convicted, once he was in prison, that definitely was a day that people in the community were happy that he was no longer going to be able to terrorize anyone.
Franklin Yuen remains in the grave. What was his crime? He didn't have one. He was an innocent victim, living his life in the best way he thought he could, to take care of himself and his family.
It's a terrible thing for young kids to see or witness the death of one of their parents. I can't imagine they'll ever recover from that.
I would just extend my admiration and respect for the strength that they've carried out in living their life after losing their father.
One of the things I'm the most proud of is the Huntington Beach Police Department. A crime of this kind of magnitude, police would not stop until they solved it. They don't give up.
There are odd twists in these investigations. And then as an investigator, you can find one tiny bit of information that gets you one step closer. It's what makes you tick. It's what gives you the energy to keep going.
Every homicide detective everywhere in the world, Detective Mason included, wade through quicksand that's waist deep for months and sometimes even years to find the Willie Linton Halls of the world because no one else is going to.
Chicago at 3:12 a.m. A sodium orange hush, the lake breathing cold into alleys, the L rattling like loose bones overhead, and a single car idling at a curb where no one should stop. Hazard lights pulsing like a heartbeat. 2 flashes, pause, 2 flashes, and then silence. A night watchman across the street remembers the way the steam curled from the grill and how the driver never got out, remembers the shape of a person in the front seat, a shadow that never became a face, remembers the lift of a phone, the tiny blue glow, the door that opened but didn't slam, the click of a heel that didn't fit the weather, remembers because 24 hours later that car would still be there, and the city would finally look inside and the word would start to travel the way it always does, through whispers, through scanner chatter, through morning radio, missing woman, nurse, mother, last seen after the night shift, South Loop, Chicago, 2001. Cold case in the making and no one knew it yet, and you were already hooked because you can hear the headline in your head, can't you? The tabloid cadence waiting in the wings. Mysterious disappearance, community shocked, strange clue found, a story beginning with a parked car and a vanished life, and the way the wind carries secrets down streets that don't forget. Her name, on paper, is simple, clean, Midwestern, Elena Price, 28, RN at Mercy, dark hair pulled tight, all shift, then loose for the walk to the lot where a security camera blinks and does nothing. And she's grounded by the small rituals that make a life solid, the coffee in a chipped blue mug, the daughter's mittens clipped to her coat, the rent envelope thumb-creased from worry. And on that night, she tells a coworker she's too tired to think, laughs because exhaustion is the only currency they can afford. and she slips her badge, her keys, her pager into the same pocket they always live in, a quiet choreography you perform without looking. And she steps into the cold. The last witness who truly sees Elena is the vending machine repairman who says she bought a ginger ale from a broken machine and didn't take change because it spat quarters unpredictably, and he remembers the way she tipped the can against her cheek before popping it open, the way a person blesses themselves without meaning to, and then her footsteps are gone into a night with too many doorways and not enough eyes. The car, a red Saturn SL2 with a child sticker peeling from the rear window, doesn't belong to Elena. That's another hook. It belongs to a friend from church who lent it because Elena's Civic was in the shop and the timing belt had turned the week into a puzzle of rides. And in the days after, she fails to pick up her daughter from her sister's place, fails to clock in for the next shift, fails to answer the pager that usually vibrates against her pulse. The Saturn becomes a landmark, a shrine, a question. Why was it found 2 blocks from the water? Why was the driver's seat adjusted too far back for her height? Why was the hazard switch worn shiny as if pressed again and again? And the city starts to assemble a theory, because that's what cities do when night goes wrong. She met someone, she ran, she slipped, she staged it, she never existed at all, and every story makes sense until it doesn't. Detectives ride the first wave of urgency, that bright, frantic window before the trail crusts over. They pull tapes that snow and smear. They canvass 24 businesses. They lift prints that tell them only that Chicago is crowded with hands. They lean over a map pocked with pins and draw a string between points like they can sew the wound shut if they just cross enough lines. They talk to the sister, to the Ix who works nights at a parts warehouse by Cicero, to the supervisor who admits Elena had asked to switch to days, to the pastor who had seen her sing with the small choir and close her eyes on the longer notes. They talk to the vending machine repairman again, the watchman, a taxi driver who thinks maybe he saw someone like her staring out a window on Wabash around 3 a.m. Chara, hair down, face turned inward. They talk and get less with every question, and the city wakes to the kind of morning headline the city knows too well. Missing nurse, South Side, last seen after late shift, family begs for answers. A ribbon of text across a television broadcast, a photograph held under a chin because hands shake on camera. The first strange clue arrives as an embarrassment, a call on Elena's pager time-stamped 3:21 a.m. 3 minutes after the watchman swears the driver's door opened, a number from a payphone that no longer exists. A detective named Rosales, steel thermos, scarf knitted by someone who cares, stands in the wind at the corner where the payphone used to be, and imagines the bell, the small echo inside the plastic hood, the way a number without a voice isn't a footprint, it's a ghost. And the hardware shop owner across the street says, yes, there was a phone, but the city took it last spring, and Rosales stares at the concrete bolt heads in the sidewalk like they're teeth in a jaw. The second strange clue is a loop of tape from a loading dock camera behind a bakery on State. A figure walking with arms pressed tight against the body, head down, a shape that fits Elena, then doesn't, then fits again when you want it to, moving past a stack of flour sacks like a shadow that's too careful, and there's a flash of light at the pavement, the glint of a key or a coin, and the frame refreshes and the thing is gone, and the detectives run it forward and back until it feels intimate, as if watching hard enough will conjure a detail into existence. But the city has a way of teaching you the limits of your eyes. The third clue is the car itself. No forced entry, no prints of value, a faint smell of bleach that could be a coincidence or a message, a brown hair too long to be Elena's, a receipt for gasoline on a route she never takes, a smear that tests as cola on the inside of the door, as if someone drank fast and shook, a sticky constellation that says nothing except that someone was nervous or sugar-hungry or both. The car becomes a container for everything you want to believe, and the detectives keep returning to it in the impound lot like mourners who can't leave the grave. And yet it's not what they find that anchors the story, it's what they don't. No withdrawals on her bank card, no pings from the pager after 3:21, no calls to friends that night, no tantrum in the days prior that would suggest a break, no secret boyfriend in the phone book, no diary entry that reads like a goodbye. You look for the fault lines in a person's life because when a life splits, you want the split to feel inevitable, to protect you from the randomness, but sometimes the ground just opens beneath a familiar step. The community responds the way a neighborhood with memory responds. Flyers stapled to poles, candlelight on the curb, talk show calls with the sister's voice going hoarse under studio lights, a church basement full of volunteers with highlighters and maps, a diver on loan from a suburban department scanning a dark canal with sonar because rumor says a car went into the water, though the rumor can't keep its own details straight, a pastor saying her name into a microphone as if speaking it loudly enough could rope her back. And there's this detail that stays with people because it feels like a riddle. The ginger ale can from the vending machine never turns up at the scene, The detectives never find it. It becomes a small tin totem for all the missing pieces, a bright green absence, simple, sharp, endless. The earliest suspect is always the nearest circle, the X with the parts warehouse clock-ins that line up, the friend from church who denies any late-night calls, the coworker whose carpool fell apart that week, the manager who says Elena seemed distracted. And suspicion in a case like this is a chemistry experiment. You add it to every beaker and you wait for a color change, but nothing reacts. No lab report comes back with the bolded breakthrough. No DNA aligns with the brown hair. No alibi crumbles under heat. And as winter thaws into a wet spring, the story cools into something heavier, the way a pot of coffee goes from urgent to stale but still sits in the middle of the table. That is how a cold case is born, not with a dramatic bang, but with slow suffocation, with tips that drift from the urgent to the uncanny. The man who dreams of a locker in a Greyhound station, the woman who swears she heard Elena singing on a bus near Pilsen, the child who finds a badge lanyard under a swing set that turns out to belong to someone else, another year, another missing person who was found and then forgotten again by everyone except the people who loved them. And you begin to taste the city's patience thinning like broth. What lingers, though, is the hazard lights, the two flashes, pause, two flashes, the ritual of a trapped thing, and Rosales keeps returning to that rhythm. He lies awake with the cadence in his chest, two flashes, pause, two flashes, and he starts combing incident reports for anything, any car, any pattern of emergency blinkers used as a code by burglars, by Johns, by anyone who learned to speak with light. And this is where the investigation learns to breathe underwater, where you continue without oxygen, where you let your brain hold contradictions without choosing. She's alive and she's not. She left and she was taken. She walked and she was carried. And the story settles into you like weather. Years will pass, but not yet. For now it is still 2001, and you can smell bleach faintly in a red Saturn. You can hear the clap of a loose manhole cover as a taxi rolls over. You can imagine a payphone ringing that isn't there and a woman walking with her arms pressed tight as if she's holding herself inside. You can see a child's sticker peeling from glass and feel the soft weight of a mitten clipped to a coat that will hang by a door at the sister's apartment all spring. An accusation and a prayer in one. And if you lean closer, you can hear the kind of city whisper that turns cases. A rumor about a dock worker who always looks tired on Monday mornings, about a warehouse that only hums after midnight, about a storage unit with a smell no one names because naming makes it real. And if you pull back, you can see the headline already sharpening its edges. Chicago 2001 cold case, strange clue, soda can, pager call, hazard lights, a map webbed with string, a detective with a scarf, a sister with a hollow voice. This is the beginning you'll replay when the end finally arrives, the opening where everything could still be anything. Between the lines, there's a smaller mystery, the kind that gnaws at the investigator not because it's grand, but because it's precise. The receipt in the glove compartment shows gas purchased at 2:28 a.m. on a road Elena never drove. A road that runs along a strip of warehouses with security guards who rotate like sentries in a slow parade, and nobody remembers a red Saturn stopping because the night is a conveyor belt of anonymous headlights. The receipt is ink on thermal paper, heat sensitive, the numbers ghost when you touch them, and Rosales puts it in a plastic sleeve and writes one word at the top, Y, and the Y expands to fill the room like steam. There is a thing that happens in the days before a disappearance, a flicker that only makes sense after, and the friend from church eventually admits to a small detail that isn't small at all. Elena had been saving the choir money in a jar for a new keyboard, $20 here and there, a quiet pooling of effort, and 2 days before she vanished, she asked to borrow from her own jar and then put it back within the hour, apologizing for the noise of her own request, and that rhythm, out, in. Sorry suggests someone called her, someone set a small fire under the necessity of cash, someone who knew her well enough to keep it small so it wouldn't trip alarms. And when you hear that, the hazard lights feel less like panic and more like a signal meant for somebody specific, a private strobe in a public dark. A city is a machine that records its citizens whether they volunteer or not, and still the record fails you when you need it. The bus cameras don't reach the curb. The alley cam blurs at the edges. The keycard logs at Mercy say the badge chirped at 3:04 a.m. when she left, but the door guard says he never saw her, and he's honest because the honest people confess to gaps. The gaps are where the story breeds. And every time the sister sits with a detective in a small room with soft chairs and a hard table, she hears the same sentence in a dozen dialects. We don't stop, even when it feels like we stop. And she nods because the alternative is a scream that will turn the blinds to trembling teeth. If you're listening closely, you feel the city tilt toward an answer you can't see yet, like glass of water on a moving train. Surface calm, momentum hidden. The case will solve one day. This is not a spoiler but a promise, a contract formed between the living and the dead. But tonight is still the long night, and the voice in your ear is a steady metronome. Look here, then here, then here, and do not blink. Because in a city like this, the truth often appears as a small bruise on an ordinary day, and the bruise is already forming somewhere you have not looked. The days after a disappearance make a peculiar sound in a city like this, a hum that settles under every ordinary noise, a baseline of worry you can feel through your shoes. And in the squad room, the hum is paperwork and coffee and a wall map that refuses to give anything back. Rosales moves a pin half an inch, then moves it back, because sometimes control is measured in centimeters. And while the news anchors keep the story warm with looping B-roll, the red Saturn in impound, the sister at a podium, the badge photo in a soft TV blur, the investigation skids into the procedural ice that turns urgency to friction, subpoenas that take time, records that arrive in the wrong order, witnesses who remember better when they're wrong. And still there is momentum, a private kind, a stubborn current under the ice. At 7:12 a.m., on day 3, a patrol officer from the 1st District drops a small note on Rosales' desk like a coin on a counter. Traffic camera on Roosevelt picked up hazard lights at 3:10 a.m. 2 flashes, pause, 2 flashes, then off. Car moving east. The shot is grainy, the timestamp bad by 2 minutes as usual, but the pattern hums like the metronome in Rosales' chest. He looks at the frame, the second one, the faint halo of reflection on the wet street, and he thinks of code, of a signal, of someone asking for something without words. And he asks for all the city's traffic flashes from 2:30 to 3:30 and gets a stack of discs that will eat half the week. Meanwhile, the gas receipt takes on gravity because time marks territory and 2:28 a.m. 8 draws a circle around a strip of warehouses and service roads that don't love visitors. A security guard at the South Branch Logistics Complex signs the visitor log with a ballpoint pen that scratches loud enough to be heard in memory and says, yeah, Sunday into Monday is quiet but not empty. Trucks ghost through, there's always a hum. He thinks he saw a red compact threading the lanes on a night like that, but you know how memories stack. They borrow from the last story you heard and pretend they were there the whole time. And Rosales writes down the name anyway. Nolan, night guard, careful eyes, heavy coat. A crime scene tech named Han, new to the unit, quiet, a brain like flypaper, goes back to the Saturn with fresh gloves and a small patience. She takes what's already been taken and stares at it as if the act of seeing could coax it to speak. She scrapes the sticky cola bloom from the inside of the door seam and gasses it in a tiny chamber and waits for a whisper of print. She measures the driver's seat track and reads the indentations, not just where the lock catches, but where the foam resists. She finds a faint glitter in the carpet under the passenger side, a sliver of mica or glass that might be a shed from a worksite lamp, and she folds it into an envelope like a note to the future. She lifts a hair from the headrest, not brown, but nearly black, short and kinked, maybe synthetic, maybe from a wig, which would be a tabloid flourish if this city didn't hand you stranger flourishes on Tuesday mornings. She tastes bleach in the air the way cops do, through the memory of the scent rather than the scent itself, and writes, odor persists. Elena's sister, Mara, sits at her kitchen table and keeps a stack of flyers pinned beneath a chipped mug, and every knock at the door is a correction her body rehearses and rejects at the same time. The daughter, 8 and watchful, has learned how to hold adults together with her eyes, which is a trick no child should have to learn. At the church, the jar for the choir money is replaced by a second jar with Elena's name hand-lettered on the glass, and the sight of 2 jars with the same gravity makes the pastor's voice shake at the end of every sentence. In the neighborhood, you can feel the timeline become shared property. Everyone has an opinion about 3:12 a.m., about hazard lights as a cry or a code, about the payphone that rang from a corner where there is no phone, and all those opinions congeal into a fog that both reveals and hides. On day 4, a tip slips through the inbox grind and lands with an unearned grace. A bakery driver saw a woman matching Elena's description near the docks on Loomis around 2:50, walking with arms tight to her sides, a posture like the blizzard walk even though the snow is in the forecast and not on the ground. The driver says she looked like she was keeping something inside, not warmth, but words. He kept moving because the route doesn't pause for strangers who look like ghosts, and he hates that about himself now. There is a pattern forming. Not proof, but pulse. The loading dock camera on state, the memory of a walk, the river pull, the warehouses with their sodium lamps, the feeling of a city sliding its attention toward the waterline. Rosales and Han take the warehouse strip the way divers take a lake, methodical squares. They go door to door with photographs that make people look away. They count cameras that work, and cameras that pretend to. They meet a night manager with a spotless clipboard and a smile lacquered on with coffee. His name is Bruckner, and his eyelids say he lives at night. He runs a cold storage facility called Harbor Tide, with units that exhale frost when opened, and he's proud of his inventory system like a father with a report card. He says they log every entry, thumbprint, key card, truck, burp. He says he doesn't remember a red Saturn because he isn't paid to notice cars that don't pull a dock plate. He shows the logs, and they are the cleanest thing in the building. There's a smell that lives under the Freon bloom, a sweet metallic that could be nothing or could be everything. Han points at a service elevator that sighs like an old lung and asks for the maintenance book. Bruckner finds pride again and flips pages and gestures at dates. The pen strokes are neat, regular, too regular. The elevator cage has a scratched panel that reads FEB 98 in a rushed hand, then a crossout, then Oro 1 in a different hand, and Han's eye catches the way the second hand presses too hard, like someone pretending to be casual. She rubs a gloved fingertip over the edge and feels a grit, and when she lifts her finger there's a faint cola stick to it, a tackiness in a place no one drinks, and you can see her mind build a bridge from the Saturn door seam to the cage panel in a single breath. She doesn't say the bridge out loud because saying makes the bridge heavier, and she wants it light enough to lift. The payphone that called Elena's pager becomes a pilgrimage site in absence. There is only concrete bolt heads like metal freckles and a graffitied lamppost with tags that layer into a script the detectives cannot read. But across the intersection is a late-night check cashing place with a camera that points where the phone used to be, and that camera has tapes. The tapes are old, they stutter, they oversaturate reds until brake lights bloom like wounds. But at 3:20 a.m., give or take the usual skew, a figure steps into frame and stops exactly where the phone should be. The posture is careful, the head is angled as if listening for a dial tone, and the hand lifts and moves with small, precise flicks, and Rosales feels a surge of the impossible, a person ghosting through a ritual for the benefit of a camera they don't know is there, reenacting a call to a phone that isn't. Then the figure takes 2 steps back as if obeying a voice that says, "Give me space," and a car slides along the curb. Hazard lights off, just headlights now, and the figure leans, then recoils, and then the frame catches a tiny flare. Cigarette, lighter, spark, and a van from the far lane blinds the rest and the world becomes glare. It lasts 3 seconds, an eternity in police minutes, and then the sidewalk is ordinary again. The ex-boyfriend holds up under pressure because pressure reveals structure, and his structure is boring. His time card matches his face, slack with grease and the kind of midnight that lives in fluorescent light. He wants to be useful but can't be, and he hates that role because men like him are always framed by it in other people's stories. He offers a name anyway, a guy Elena didn't like at the hospital, an orderly with a way of standing too close, and that lead eats a day and turns to paper because the orderly is creepy but not criminal, and the city is full of the first category. What bites harder is the friend from church who lent the car. His name is Joel, and his tendency is to explain too much, to pre-answer what you haven't asked. And that tendency reads to cops as heat. He corrects tiny details, like whether he gave Elena the spare key on Saturday morning or Friday night. And the tiny corrections feel like rocks in a shoe. They change your gait. When asked about the choir jar, he says he didn't know about it. Then he says he knew about it but didn't know she borrowed. Then he says he was with her when she put the money back and that the jar was behind the organ, not on the table. The organ behind the jar, behind the story. And Han watches his hands as he speaks and sees how his thumbs rub each other like they want to erase their prints. The brown hair from the Saturn comes back as dog because the lab likes to remind you when you've been dramatic for no reason. The nearly black hair from the headrest is synthetic and sheds from a costume wig because the city also likes to remind you that theaters and theme parties exist at 3 in the morning. And yet even the red herrings in a case like this feed the rhythm because the word wig in a file turns public imagination feral if it ever leaks, and the detectives build their walls higher to keep the wolves out. In the 5th-day email pile, buried under form replies from companies that pretend they love helping public safety while billing by the hour, there is a small forward from a detective in Vice who owns too many beepers for nostalgia alone. He says hazard lights, 22, used to be a quiet signal for a certain skimming crew that worked the riverfront in the late 90s. A code that meant I'm here, keep the door propped, quick pickup, no chatter. The crew moved stolen electronics through cold storage because no one counts pallet boxes of sealed things if they look boring. The names attached to that crew are not saints, a driver named Deke, a fixer named Vera who ran a key copy racket, and a dock worker who always looked tired on Monday mornings, which is the kind of gossip detail that feels true even when it isn't. The dock worker's name is written in pencil because pencil invites erasure, Clay. Rosales tastes the old metal of something coming back around. Code as language, warehouses as lungs, hazard lights as syntax, and Elena as a sentence that broke the grammar and was punished. He goes back to Harbortide at night because buildings tell different stories at 2 a.m., and the river pushes a cold through the brick that eats your speech. He stands under the service elevator's soft wheeze and listens, really listens, to how a cable talks when it's been asked to hold more than it should. He can feel it in his fillings, a faint buzz. He writes down nothing because sometimes you keep a detail in your pocket like a talisman. Han walks the perimeter with a small UV lamp and finds nothing that fluoresces, which feels like an answer even if it isn't. A woman calls the tip line and cries because she saw Elena on a bus, she swears, humming a hymn they used to sing in school. She thinks it was Tuesday, but it could have been a memory being loud, and she hangs up before they can ask for the bus number. A man calls to confess to a crime he didn't commit because he wants a hotel bed and a hot meal, and to talk to someone who has to listen. A kid calls and breathes and then says, in a voice still waiting to drop, that he saw hazard lights by the river once and it meant leave. And in all of that noise, there is always, always a note that matters. But you don't get to paint it red until later, so you record everything and you keep the hum in your bones. The ginger ale can refuses to exist, which is somehow worse than if it had turned up crushed and shiny in a gutter. Its absence refines the myth of that last gentle gesture, cool metal to cheek, pop hiss, the tiny perfume spume, until it becomes a relic of a saint no one can prove lived. The sister asks about it like it's a riddle that will unlock a door. If we find the can, we find her. And Rosales says they're looking because they are, endlessly, for everything. Elongated man-hours stretched across alleys and cameras and bins and drains, a city combed with the patience of a mother braiding hair. On day 7, the case begins to wear the clothes of a cold one because the first weekend is a ritual in homicide. The board loses its magnets, the photo loses its fresh tape hiss and starts to sag. The supervisors pull one detective to help on another heater, and that's when stubbornness has to become its own fuel. Rosales asks for old reports on riverfront theft crews and fills the empty chair next to his with stapled ghosts. Han revisits the payphone camera and notices not the figure but the shadow of the figure, thin at the ankle and thicker at the calf, the silhouette of a cuff that's not jean but work pant, not hospital but dock. She slows the frames and watches the way weight rolls from heel to toe and thinks of the way night workers move, economy of motion, no slop. She writes 2 words, dock gate, and underlines them twice. This is the point in the story where the city feels complicit by inaction, where the weather is an alibi for too many people and the river is a vault, and the detectives do the most boring, holy thing their job allows. They keep showing up, they keep calling numbers that don't love to answer, they keep stepping into rooms that smell like old coffee and new fear. And out on Loomis, in a shed that someone calls an office because there's a file cabinet in it, there is a clipboard with a name written in block letters next to a unit number, a rented space in a cold storage annex where nobody stores food. The name is ordinary, pale as paper, but the handwriting is not. The G curls like someone who learned to write fast in a loud place. If you run your finger over it, you can feel the pressure through the top sheet, and if you open the unit, you'll feel air pressed back, stale and wrong. But that is not tonight. Tonight is the long walk between pins on a map, the late look from a bus driver who isn't sure what he saw, the notebook where hazard lights become language, the elevator cage with its sticky breath, the van's glare that ate 3 seconds of videotape, and the hum under the city's skin that says the ending exists even when you can't see it. By the second week, the case grows a second heartbeat, slower but stronger, the kind that keeps organs alive in long surgeries, and the squad room adjusts to it. Rosales stops counting hours and starts counting loops. How many times he's walked the same warehouse row, how many times he's watched the check cashing tape flicker, how many times he's lifted the gas receipt by its plastic sleeve and let the numbers ghost under the fluorescent hum. And he finds comfort in the repetition because rhythm is a kind of prayer. Han maps the riverfront not by addresses, but by sounds and smells and small resistances, where a gate groans, where a latch sticks, where the cold breathes out of a seam in a wall, and she keeps her notes spare, a weather report for places people don't live. The clipboard at the annex becomes a promise, but promises need paper, and paper needs patience. The cold storage annex is owned by a shell with a mailing address in a strip mall 2 towns over, and consent gets you hallways and the lobby and the elevator that exhales Freon, but not the unit with the wrong air and the wrong quiet. The name next to the number reads G. Clay, block letters, and nobody inside the building knows a G. Clay, not as a customer, not as a rumor, which is its own kind of knowledge. They post a drive-by at midnight, and at 4, the car low on the curb with a thermos haloing steam, watching who comes and who leaves, and the cameras you can see watch back with their indifferent red eyes. This is when the city's music shifts. The case stops being a newscast and starts being a story told in smaller rooms, in bars that vacuum at morning, in the quiet between songs on late-night radio. And in that space, a name rises like a bubble through syrup, Vera. More description than identity. The key lady, the copier, the friend who could slip you into a place you didn't belong with a laugh and a folded bill. Vice has her as a rumor with legs, a woman who sells access like a side dish out by the docks, a woman who knows dock workers' weaknesses the way a locksmith knows tumblers. And when Rosales lays her among the other pieces, Deke the driver, Clay the tired Monday man, the 2-2 blink, the board looks less like confetti and more like a sentence with missing commas. He asks for old theft reports that smell like filing cabinets and steam and finds an odd echo. In 1998, a freezer at a different facility lost 2 pallets of sealed electronics in a night with no alarms, and a guard on that shift quit the following week with a handwritten note that misspelled Wednesday. The report mentions hazard lights blinking on a box truck awaiting a back door to be propped. It's not proof, but it's a rhyme, and crimes, like songs, like to reuse a hook. Joel keeps talking because silence isn't his instrument. He arrives at the station with a 3-ring binder of car maintenance for a car he doesn't own anymore, and a bank withdrawal slip for $20 that he offers like blood. Proof he didn't touch the choir jar. Proof he's the kind of man who documents the small things because he can't control the large. He says he lent Elena the Saturn because he's a helper, because the world is a rowboat and he pulls an oar, because she asked. He says he never learned to use hazard lights at all. He forgets they exist. He says the gas receipt must have been hers, not his, and he smiles the wrong way when he says it. His timeline flexes around the edges but never breaks, and he leaves behind a smell of cheap coffee and church basement carpet cleaner. And Han writes one small line, talks to fill silence, and underlines it because sometimes that is a tell by itself. The hospital gives up more small rooms, a supply closet where Elena once cried and then laughed when a friend walked in, a stairwell where someone had written, "Be kind" in Sharpie, and someone else had written, "or else," a basement corridor that makes your breath bloom, and a door that opens toward the loading dock where the camera once saw a shape moving careful. An orderly with a lazy grin says night shift turns you into a ghost because you live in the back hallways and the alleys between the living and the cleaning. He says he doesn't know Elena, then he says she had nice shoes. The contradictions are the city's bass line, and you step to it even when you hate the song. A breakthrough comes disguised as drudgery. A volunteer at the church, tired of the whisper carousel, brings Rosales a bag of recycling from the choir room because she can't stand the thought that anything there might matter and be thrown away. It's all paper plates and plastic forks and a flyer for a bake sale, and at the bottom is a crushed soda can that is not ginger ale. It's a generic cola in greenish paint, and for a second everyone in the room wants it to be the can, wants relic and answer and proof, and then Han's fingers, quick and careful, turn the can and reveal a dent that matches the teeth of the church's cheap can opener, not a vending machine ridge, and she smiles without her mouth. Still, the can goes to evidence because sometimes the universe plays dirty and hides prizes and decoys. The traffic discs are a blizzard of angel hair and glare and misaligned clocks, but on one, from a pole at an angle near Loomis, a pattern repeats. At 2:57 a.m., and a pair of hazard flashes played a small car. At 3:01, the same pair from a box truck that pulls forward then stops as if correcting. At 3:09, the small car again, 2-2, idling, then off, then a van slides between the camera and the lane and erases the next 3 seconds. The van, when tracked by plate, belongs to a rental outfit that eats subpoenas for breakfast and offers nothing but scanned forms and a shrug because the renter paid cash and the camera that would have captured his face was under a towel for cleaning at the exact moment of pickup. The coincidence is cut from the city's fabric, which means you cannot prove design until later, when later shows you the seam. The service elevator begins to speak in more than size. A maintenance tech, brought in with a toolbox that looks like a steel hymn book, opens the cage and drops a light down the shaft. A pale circle that trembles on rivets and cable grease and something else. The something else is a smear that looks like cola gone to varnish, sticky in streaks as if a gloved hand braced where it shouldn't. And lower down there is a nick on the wall where something too hard for the space scraped and then kept going. The tech says that's wait plus hurry, and he says the cage will hold more than it promises, but not forever. And the word forever folds itself into the air like a paper plane that won't land. Han leans into the shaft and smells more than cold. She smells tired metal and old breath and the kind of sweetness that means time plus something that was once alive. And she doesn't flinch because flinching is a luxury. She steps back and writes, "Odor returns when shaft warmed." In the annex lobby, there is a bulletin board with a curling flyer for a community watch meeting and a smaller card for a locksmith service with a cartoon key wearing a hat. The number on the card is 1 digit away from the one Vice has for Vera from 2 years ago. A small cruelty, that 1-digit taunt, but enough. A detective who works phones the way pickpockets work pockets convinces the voicemail behind the number to become a name. Verity K. And a mailbox in Bridgeport receives a postcard that will never be read because it's not meant to be. Surveillance finds a woman who fits a rumor moving through nights like someone skipping squares on a chalked grid, stepping light, pausing just long enough to press a thumb to a doorframe, to glance up at a camera, to smile at a guard who thinks he's being seen. They follow her to a storage facility not at the river but near it, where heat edits smell and time, and watch her hold 2 key rings like a rosary. She visits 3 units and leaves one without opening it, and the one she doesn't open is the one with the air wrong, which is a kind of confession if you speak the language of buildings. Meanwhile, the sister's voice goes hoarse, telling a story that never stops at the end, and the daughter learns to sleep with the radio on because silence magnifies absence. The flyers bleach in February sun that doesn't warm, and a kid on a bike pulls one down and folds it into his pocket like a trading card. And later, when he opens it in his kitchen, his mother cries and says, "Give that back to the world," and he tapes it to the freezer and nods. The ex keeps working nights because nights don't care, and he asks a cop he knows if it's okay to pray for people who leave you, and the cop says prayer is just talking when there's no one who can answer, so yes. A warehouse manager with the lacquered smile returns with a new polish and says he found an old log in a drawer that lists a driver named D. Kent who took a pallet at 2:40 the night Elena went missing, and the D could be Deke if you wanted it, and the Kent could be the kind of fake last name that winks at you from beneath a hat, and Rosales writes it down without hope, because hope is too allergic to this job. And instead, he writes down the notations next to the entry, 2 slashes, then a circle, and later Han, tracing with a finger, says the slashes could be 2 and 2, and the circle could be a light, and the logbook becomes less an inventory and more a diary written by someone who didn't want to be read. They get their paper for the unit because a judge who lost a cousin to an alley once reads the affidavit and taps the desk and says the word necessity like a lid closing on a pot. The warrant wears its authority like a winter coat, heavy and obvious, and the annex manager, who has been helpful to the point of performance, becomes truly helpful when the paper touches the door. The unit number hums as the latch lifts, and the air that spills is thick and tired and has been waiting to speak. Inside is not a body. The city makes you wait for the worst or denies it altogether, but inside is a confession in parts. Moving blankets with a coal attack, a dolly with a wheel that clicks every 4th rotation as if keeping time, a roll of hazard triangles shoved under a shelf like you hide a toy from a toddler, and a thin toolbox with 3 key blanks that match an elevator panel manufacturer. There's a wig on a foam head, cheap hair with a shine like varnish. The kind that sheds like it wants to be found, and in a shallow tray a scatter of coins and a phone card with a hole punch and the imprint of a payphone company. Han lifts the tray, and underneath is clean wood, a relief that feels like a lie, and she sets the tray down like a priest returns a cup to an altar. There is no Elena, not even a scrap that loves her name, but there is the rhythm of the tutu everywhere you look, a domestic inventory of a small crew's professional fear, and there is a rental agreement in a plastic sleeve with the name G. Clay and a signature that curls its G too hard, and the dates begin 3 weeks before Elena's disappearance and end the month after, and the rent is paid in cash, and the receipt ink ghosts at the touch the same way the gas receipt numbers do, as if all evidence in this case has been dipped in winter. Clay is a dock worker who lives in a 2nd-floor apartment where the railing is one hard lean from tragedy. He has the face of a man who makes small favors into a life, and then can't repay the favors that matter. He is polite to cops because his mother taught him that politeness confuses power just long enough to breathe. He calls everyone boss and carries a key ring that rattles like a song. He says he doesn't know Elena, and the sentence lands with no weight because it's true. He says he doesn't know Vera, and that lands with a ripple because it's a practiced lie. He says he's never rented a storage unit, and when they show him the rental agreement, he squints like the paper is far away and says, "That's not my G." And Han watches the corner of his mouth fail to commit to the lie and writes, "Left corner of lip twitches on K sounds." They don't arrest him because arresting to feel useful is how cases shatter, and instead they orbit him, counting his Mondays, counting his dock shifts, counting who he meets when the night thickens. And on one of those nights, a small red car that might be a Saturn, if you half close your eyes, pulls up near where the payphone used to be and blinks 2-2, and a woman with a cap pulled low steps to the curb and pretends not to see the car, and the car pulls away, and the woman walks, and the tail picks her up, and the city gives up 10 blocks before she vanishes into a door with a lock that knows her. And when the door opens again, she is carrying nothing except a smile, which is sometimes heavier than a box. The ginger ale can remains a ghost. The elevator keeps its sigh. The river moves like a conveyor with no off switch, and the case slides toward a season where snow erases footprints and preserves them at the same time. The headline in your head sharpens. Chicago 2001 cold case, hazard code, storage unit secrets, dock worker shadow, and the voice that's been in your ear since the first hazard blink steadies and says, look again at what you think you've already seen, because the answer is rarely new. It's usually an old fact lit from a different angle, and somewhere in a stack of traffic discs, a pair of flashes waits to be noticed by the right tired eyes, and somewhere in a ledger, a curling G waits to be matched to a hand on a different page, and somewhere in a church basement, a child's mitten clipped to a coat waits for a door that stays closed too long. And the city holds its breath because it has learned, painfully, that sometimes holding your breath is how you hear. The fourth week sharpens the case the way winter sharpens breath, edges clearer, mistakes louder, and the rhythm goes metronome fast. Precinct lights hum, subpoenas land, doors open because paper says so. And Rosales rides the momentum like a train switching tracks without slowing, station after station. Harbor Tide, the annex, the church basement, the warehouse row off Loomis, back to the hospital's back corridors. He carries the gas receipt in a plastic sleeve like a relic, consults it like a calendar page that refuses to die. Han carries a small UV wand and a notebook with lines so spare they look like cuts. Together they start pressing the city at its seams, looking for leaks. The unit they opened with the wrong air keeps giving in small doses. Not enough to satisfy, enough to addict. Under the hazard triangles are 2 crushed flares that stain everything they touch a pale rust. And inside the thin toolbox, beneath the key blanks, is a folded card from a locksmith supplier whose catalog shows a glossy elevator panel with the exact brand stamp Han traced with her finger in the cage. A handwritten discount code on the back reads VK22 in ink that bled once and dried. VK like initials, 22 like hazard language, and there's your pressurized clue. Thread it carefully or it snaps. Rosales writes VK equals Vera key in the margin, then crosses it out because neat answers this early make the universe vindictive. They do not knock on Vera's door. They fold themselves into her life sideways, professional pickpocketing. A utility worker with a clipboard glances over her mail slot and notes plain envelopes, cash heavy every Friday. A camera across from her building blinks and captures her leaving at odd times. 2:15, 3:40, 4:05, nights breathing in and out while she walks the edge. She meets men who look like favors wearing coats, women who look like decisions made months ago. She buys coffee at a diner that used to pretend it closes at midnight. She carries 2 key rings, one noisy with the honest metal of home, one pared down, 3 cuts that matter. And she never sets the second ring on the table, not even to light a cigarette. Surveillance is boredom punctuated by the proof that you were right to be bored, on a Wednesday at 2:32 a.m. She cuts south toward the river and stops beneath a camera that's too high to matter, and still she lifts her face to it and smiles, a small warning to anyone who thinks they own her image. That night ends at a different storage facility, not cold storage, self-storage, fluorescent, humming, a place where people store old lives and new mistakes, and she stands at a roll-up door and does not open it. She breathes like the air on the other side answers, and then she leaves. The unit belongs to a shell with a P.O. box, and the lease is current, and the manager will not consent to anything because he has learned that in this city, the price of curiosity is liability. Clay moves like a man who believes he's average enough to disappear into his shift. He counts pallets under his breath, says boss too often, holds doors that aren't for holding, and then lets them fall when he remembers the rules. His hands are scar-mapped from work that teaches you to keep your hands out of places that bite. He routes his Mondays through corners where nobody bothers to sweep. He has a dog with a patient face and a leash that's frayed where teeth worried it. He denies Vera with a politeness that irritates the air. He denies the storage unit the way a man denies ever having been to a beach when sand lives in his shoes. Rosales lets him because letting your suspect feel they've successfully disappeared is a way to outline them with negative space. Han watches his gait and hears the chalk of the tip line kid, hazards mean leave, and lines it up with the cuff silhouette from the check cashing tape. Dock gate meets cuff shape meets a life that knows night doors. This isn't proof, but it's the way proof grows, accreting detail until weight becomes gravity. The hazard 2-2 pattern stops being rumor and becomes language in a file. Vice dumps old unit notes into Rosa Lace's lap and names a crew that barely made paper. The river mice, small-time skimmers who rode the backwash of bigger thefts, taking what fell off trucks and sometimes what didn't. The mice kept doors propped, used hazard lights to signal readiness, and the story ends in 1999 when a driver named Deke flips a truck on Kedzie and tests positive for everything you can test positive for. The file suggests a fixer named Verity and a dock worker whose Mondays always hurt. No arrests stuck because mice turn to vapor when light hits them, but the lore persists, and the lore says when they needed to load at a spot where cameras paid attention, they sometimes used a decoy. Someone familiar, someone soft-looking, someone who could stand at the wrong curb at the right hour and make a scene look ordinary enough to be ignored. Elena's face on flyers makes sense not as bait, but as cover. Nurse, mother, midnight shift, a person people don't call cops on when she lingers near a door that should stay closed. Push that too hard and you risk blaming the ghost. Hold it lightly and it becomes motive. Someone needed an ordinary shape to blur the outline of a theft, and when ordinary refused to stay ordinary, it was punished. So the line of the week becomes, what did Elena see? What did she hear? What door did she prop without knowing? What promise did she think she was keeping? The friend from church, Joel, keeps returning like an untuned instrument. He insists on helpfulness, drops paperwork like breadcrumbs, remembers small corrections that pull the story half an inch each time. He's the one who knows which choir key opens the back hall, who knows that the jar moved from table to organ at some point that week, who knows hazard triangles even though he claims he doesn't use hazards. His binder holds a parking stub for a lot near the river stamped 2:36 a.m. 3 days before Elena vanished, he says it was for a midnight coffee with a friend, and when asked who, he says the name slowly like he's adjusting it in his mouth, Vera. That is not a confession. That is a flare, and flares burn fast. They put a tail on Joel that sticks like gum. He goes to work, he goes to church, he goes to a building on 31st where every apartment has learned the sound of the landlord's threats, and at 1:58 a.m., he goes out for air and circles the block and lands at a car that could be the red Saturn if time were a spool you could rewind. It's a different red, a different age, but the shape hits memory like a key in a lock. He sits inside and the hazard lights blink 2-2 without his hand on the switch. Han watches the relay click through a windshield and writes in her notebook, retrofitted, timed, trained monster. She can hear the old mice laughing across years, teach the car to speak so the driver can lie. The elevator cage at Harbor Tide whispers louder when you learn its dialect. The maintenance tech returns with an endoscope and slides it between wall and cable run where dust doesn't settle because air moves. The camera shows scratches at chest height, a sequence like a code, 2 short scrapes, pause, 2 short, then a longer smear, as if a box corner kissed paint in rhythm. Rust dust curls like cinnamon when he taps it. He finds a seam with a sliver of purple plastic wedged, the kind of brittle that cheap tote handles turn into after winters. Han lifts it with tweezers, and it flakes in her gloved pinch like old icing. She says nothing and bags everything because silence keeps findings from performing. The smell returns when the shaft warms, and warmth comes from people, so they move people, and the cage answers, and the tech says again, wait plus hurry. The check cashing camera, useless in clarity, becomes useful in repetition. Rosales has watched the 3 seconds erased by the rental van so often the glare has a texture. He starts watching the edges, the reflected world in the check-cashing window's glass. A pale ghost image on the pane catches something the lens misses. A rectangle of light opening, then narrowing. A door, and a flash of hazard 2-2 reflected in miniature. He clocks the timing and overlays it on the warehouse log that Han called a diary, and the slashes and circle fall into a beat. 2, 2, open. The log entry for D. Kent at 2:40 becomes less fake and more choreography, and choreography means rehearsal, and rehearsal means habit, and habit means you can find it again if you look where habit loves to hide. They go back to the gas receipt and draw a donut of road around the station. Within the ring live 7 cameras and 4 guards and a diner that hums like fluorescent insomnia. They pull receipts for coffee from that hour because boredom is the mother of method. They find a slip with a scribble that reads V, just V, and Sugar X2, and the handwriting is blocky, impatient, the V overscored like a person stamping a foot. The time is 2:31. The bartender remembers the woman because she teased him about the pie dome being empty at 2 in the morning. He remembers a man across the aisle reading a racing sheet like it owed him money. He remembers hazard flash from the curb 2-2, and he remembers thinking somebody's teaching their car Morse code. He smiles when he says it, because it felt clever then. He stops smiling when Han asks which way the car went, and he says east. The cold case of the future is born in the present in the smallest ways. A receipt, a smudge, a smell. The evidence locker gains weight with things that seem trivial until they don't, and the supervisor starts to ask when this will become something you can arrest. Rosales gives him the sound of the elevator cable singing and the sight of a hazard timer and the shape of a crew reassembling like dust bunnies reforming under a couch. The supervisor wants nouns and he has verbs, and he says keep going because that is the instruction a city like this writes on your bones. In the church basement, a volunteer finds a quarter jammed in the slot of the vending machine that ate quarters. She jokes that the machine finally learned to save, and she sets the coin aside because it's old, 1998 state quarter, and later Han will pick it up and note the sticky film. Cola sweet, not a miracle, not even a decent clue. But everything goes in the bag because the bag is the future's pantry, and you don't know which ingredient will make the meal. Vera's edges fray under pressure that never announces itself. She starts doubling back more, checking mirrors too often, stopping to light cigarettes she doesn't finish. She starts standing with her back to walls that are not designed for leaning. She starts pretending to laugh when no one has offered a joke. This is what proximity to gravity does when your orbit decays. One night she goes to the 31st Street storage again, and again does not open the unit. This time she bends to look at the base of the door and runs a fingernail along the rubber lip like she's checking for a telltale. Han sees the gesture and feels the elevator cage in her palm, 2 short scrapes. Pause. 2 short, longer smear. She feels Coca-Cola sugar tack and hazard dash cadence. She says quietly, she's looking for her own language. And they put in for paper and get it because the affidavit finally sings in a key. Judges recognize coded light signals, decoy tactics, overlapping personnel, storage used to stage unspecified goods. The warrant lands, and this door, unlike the cold one, opens without argument. Inside is not a body and not nothing. A dolly wheel that ticks every 4th rotation, an orange vest with reflective strips trimmed down and restitched to narrow the silhouette. A pair of work pants cuffed at the ankle with a tape residue line that matches the shadow from the check cashing glass. A roll of plastic wrap used to bind pallets and sometimes, if you are the kind of person who doesn't mind it, to bind other things. On a shelf is a cardboard banker's box with labels that read keys, MESC, in a handwriting that cuts its K's sharp. Inside is a ring of elevator panel blanks and a baggie of screws sorted by thread pitch, small devotions to control. Under the baggie is a phone card like the one in the other unit, this one unpunched. Under that is a printout of a map with a circle where the payphone once lived and an X where the check cashing camera glares. And under that, finally, is the first piece of Elena that loves the name Elena, her badge lanyard, cloth faded, clipped end snapped, the plastic card holder cracked. It does not prove death, it does not prove anything except proximity. But proximity turns a hum into a tone you can't shake. The room goes heavy. Rosales picks it up and remembers the sister's voice, asking if they've checked the badge return bin at the hospital, and he says yes because they did, and because the answer was no then and yes now, and the yes now hurts. They take Vera in clean, no show, no cuffs in front, no sidewalk theater. In the room she's dry as paper and twice as flammable. She says she sells keys the way people sell cookies. To anyone who asks with cash, it's legal until it isn't. She says she doesn't know Elena, not even from flyers. She doesn't look at polls because polls don't look back. She says the hazard 2-2 is a coincidence. Cars do weird things when electricals go. Ask anyone. She says she once dated a driver named Deke, but he was boring and then prisoned and then dead. She says she never met Clay, but she uses the present tense and Han writes it down. She says the lanyard must have been left by a renter. This is storage. People shed skins here all the time. She says finally, soft and almost reverent, that Chicago teaches you which doors to look at and which to pass by, and that she has never been good at passing by. And Rosales lets that hang because confession sometimes arrives disguised as philosophy. They do not have cuffs for Clay either. They have a warrant for his place and a man with a dog that watches everything. They find work pants with cuff tape residue, hazard triangles scuffed, a catalog from the same locksmith supplier marked at elevator panels, and a notebook with numbers that match dock schedules. They find nothing that says Elena except the shape of a choice. Live with what you saw or be punished for seeing. And the city specializes in making punishments look like accidents. The riverfront police boat idles under a bridge and sonar draws pictures no one likes to look at for long. Divers fold themselves into water in time and come up with bicycles, shopping carts, a safe with a sad hinge. One diver surfaces and says he smelled bleach through the river, and everyone laughs because that's not how smell works, and then stops because the joke is a cut and the cut is fresh. The case is still alive, not solved, still a long night with pockets of light. But in the ledger of motion, entries shift. Hazard 2-2 becomes evidence-based, not anecdote. The elevator cage becomes a corridor, not a symbol. Vera becomes a person who knows too much. Clay becomes a person who stood too close. Joel becomes a person the story won't let go of. And Elena becomes a gravitational center you feel without seeing, the way you feel the lake in your bones when the wind remembers its name. It's still 2001 turning 2002, still flyers bleaching, still a sister wearing her voice thin, still a child's mitten clipped to a coat that never goes outside. But the investigation has teeth now, and it's biting down. There's one more clip to add before the week closes. A patrol car dash cam accidentally left recording while parked on Roosevelt at 3:11 a.m. catches a reflection in the rear window of the car ahead. Two small flares of light. Pause. Two, not from the car in frame, but from somewhere behind, out of sight, ricocheting in glass. Rosales plays it again and again and hears the hum of the city under the click of the relay. He sketches the angle. He drops a pin. He draws a line to the elevator cage with the cola varnish, to the gas receipt that refuses to fade, to the storage units with air that speaks in past tense, to a lanyard that still remembers a neck. And he thinks, not yet out loud, that endings, when they come, sound like doors that have been waiting a long time finally opening. By spring, the case learns to wear two faces, one for the cameras, polished with ongoing and active leads, community assistance, and one for the squad room, all grit and grind, and the soft scrape of optimism against facts that refuse to move, and the rhythm accelerates even as the ground thickens. The dashcam reflection on Roosevelt becomes a metronome. Rosales sketches angles on acetate like a math teacher haunted by light, overlays them on Han's warehouse map, and the point where the flares must have come from keeps landing near the Harbor Tide service alley, a throat between brick and chain link that swallows sound. They walk that alley at the same hour with the wind hard from the lake and hear, faint under the hum of refrigeration, the click a hazard relay makes when it cycles. It's not there now, it's memory, but the ears learn a case's private vocabulary and won't stop translating. The city gives them a gift dressed as bureaucracy. The elevator panel supplier answers a subpoena with an invoice for panel blanks discounted under a code VK22 tied to a shell account created from a public terminal on 31st. The shipping address is a parcel drop that cameras remember and then half forget because the clerk keeps the lens smeared with a thumbprint sheen. The signature is a curl-heavy G you could marry to Clay's if you wanted to, but forensics refuses to marry anyone on handwriting alone, not anymore. Still, the invoice dates stitch neatly to the rental dates on the annex unit. Stitches make patterns, and patterns make pressure, and pressure, in police work, is how a door feels before the lock flexes. Pressure also means politics. A deputy superintendent wants nouns. Aldermen want shows of force. A reporter with lashes like ammunition asks twice a week if the sister has lost faith, which is a way of asking for tears as quotation marks. And the chief tells Rosales to either make something arrestable or send the file to the big cold case freezer where stories nap for years. Rosales asks for 30 days and gets 14 because calendars in spring shrink, and Han shrinks nothing. She goes granular, back to the red Saturn with fresh swabs, back to the service elevator shaft with a microvac, back to the storage unit with a light that makes old sugars shine. The lab pays the grind forward. Trace adhesive on the hazard triangle box matches a specific brand of cheap double-sided tape sold in bulk at a discount house on Ashland. Receipts are a language too, and the discount house has a log that says 2 rolls went out cash at 1:12 a.m. A week before Elena vanished, camera? No. Maintenance day, but the clerk remembers a woman with a key tattoo behind one ear and a laugh that said, "Don't ask me for ID because you'll regret it." Vera lifts her hair often. Han writes, "Verification by anecdote, not evidence, but keep." The first real forensic push arrives small and impolite like most real things. A micro-vac bag from the Harbor Tide shaft gives up a sliver of cellulose with a pattern that makes the lab tech stop chewing. It's paper fiber with an embedded security thread, the kind used in phone cards of a defunct company. Under the microscope, there's a ghosted logo, Dial Star, same defunct brand stamped on the hole-punched card from the unit. Near it, caught in the dust, is a fleck of green coating consistent with carbonated beverage lacquer, not cola's caramel-heavy chemistry, but ginger ale's lighter profile. It's nothing like a fingerprint and exactly like one to a certain kind of mind. The ginger ale can, that bright absence, breathes again in the lab's cold mouth. Yes, this is from a can like that. Yes, it's shed here at a height where a hand would brace if a person were pressed, or if a person carrying a load took a breath and leaned. Yes, it's old enough to be her night. Forensic chemistry isn't poetry, but sometimes it rhymes by accident. Han reads the report twice and says quietly, she was here, not as drama, as obligation. Vera feels the leash tighten and pretends it's a necklace. She keeps moving, but the circles get smaller. Her stop's more ritual than choice. She sits at the diner with the empty pie dome and orders sugar X2 like the receipt we already met. She tells the bartender a joke about locksmiths that isn't a joke. She burns cigarettes to the filter and presses out the stubs with too much attention, as if the ashtray is taking notes. When they put her back in an interview room, no cuffs, no theater, she leans into honesty the way liars do when they're tired. She admits to the VK code, calls it a hustle, not a crime, says everybody grifts a little, says the grab-it-mice days are over because 1999 killed them with a flipped truck and a court date that taught her a new word, plausible. She claims she never saw Elena except as a photo under rain on a pole. She claims she rented units for clients and doesn't babysit their contents. She claims she knows Clay only as the guy who calls everyone boss. She claims the lanyard is a plant because cops like atmosphere. Han lets the claims pile up like plates and then slides one fact underneath. The Harbor Tide shaft gave up ginger ale lacquer. Vera blinks like a flashbulb hit her. She says people drink, which is both true and useless, and Han writes, deflects with universals. Clay tries to disappear in ordinary. He walks his dog, he smokes on the stoop, he clocks in, he holds doors, he says boss. Surveillance watches him buy double-sided tape on Ashland and a roll of pallet wrap the next day at a place where the clerk knows him as Key Guy, which is a funny name until you hold it next to elevator panel blanks and a key tattoo in a cage that smells like cola history. They pull his work boots under warrant and find a thin line of resin in a tread, adhesive residue, same bulk brand, generic but resonant, and a shard of purple plastic like the one from the shaft seam embedded in the heel, purple that gets brittle after winters. It's circumstantial, it's delicate, it's the kind of thing juries don't love and cops do because it makes the map hum. Joel, the helper, grows louder as the room turns the volume down on him. He brings more papers, more receipts, offers to help canvass, offers to sing at a vigil, offers to donate to the reward. He gives too much and too little, like a person building a moat around an empty castle. When they ask him again about that 2:36 a.m. parking stub near the river, he drops a new noun. He met Vera that night, yes, because she had an opportunity that required a person with a clean face to walk near a door. Nothing illegal, just presence, he swears. He says he didn't take the gig, he felt pricked by conscience. He says he gave Vera Elena's number because Elena needed extra cash sometimes, and who doesn't, and then he stops because saying Elena's number and Vera in one sentence turns the air into sand. There it is, context. Not proof, context, the thing that makes facts stick. Joel gulps silence. Rosales does not rescue him. Han writes, all caps, he gave Vera her. Outwardly, the investigation expands. Inwardly, it bristles. They push paper on the parcel drop, on the self-storage, on the Harbor Tide maintenance logs. A city inspector's signatures line up too neatly to be real, copy-paste lazy, and that's enough to squeeze the building for more footage, more access. The inspector, when found, is a man with a wedding ring, tan, and a shrug, and his shrug cracks into a name when the assistant state's attorney holds a perjury charge up to the light. He says he signed without seeing because a woman with a key tattoo said the building was clean and he was late for a party. Vera laughs in the interview room for the first time in weeks when told, then covers her mouth fast, muscle memory of survival. The forensic clue that changes how the room breathes arrives at an angle no one is looking for, the lanyard clip. A lab tech hungry for a merit badge runs touch DNA on the frayed woven edge where the badge plastic cracked. You don't expect much, the world fogs surfaces for a living. But a partial profile lifts anyway, 2 alleles clear, others smudged. And the partial is enough to exclude Rosales, Han, the sister, the hospital supervisor, Joel, and, wagging its finger at coincidence, Clay. It does not match Vera either. It's not Elena's either, which means the last person to handle the clip wasn't her, wasn't them. The profile is a ghost, but ghosts belong to families. When fed into CODIS, it returns nothing, and that's its own kind of signature. Someone unprinted, someone who never gave a cheek swab to the state, someone who learned early to cross the street when the law walks your side. A new noun enters the room, third. Suddenly the sentence, Vera, Clay, Joel, requires a fourth word to become grammar. Vice whispers a candidate, Deke's old replacement driver, a quiet runner who didn't drink and didn't fight and loved Mondays because the docks were soft then. A nickname, Monday, a rumor. He burned a finger on a flare and never went back to that crew after the truck flipped. A shape, a man who learned to be a shadow standing near a payphone that wasn't there. It's also the month the case starts to sag under its own weight because attention is a resource, and the city's attention has predators. A shooting on the west side eats headlines. A bonfire of politics eats bandwidth. A scandal in the property room eats goodwill. The chief asks again about arrestable nouns. The assistant state's attorney says you can build a conspiracy on gum and string, but juries want teeth. The cold case coordinator leaves a freezer door open in conversation and suggests packaging it for later, letting it nap until science grows longer fingers. Rosalise resists on muscle memory, on oath, on the sound of hazard clicks in his chest. Han resists on the logic of unfinished symphonies. The sister resists with a new press conference where her voice is a blade, not a plea. The daughter resists by asking in a small voice if they can stop using the word cold because it makes her cold. So they sprint into the last of their 14 days like runners who know the finish line is a cliff. They lean hard on the rental van that ate 3 seconds of tape. They find the clerk who draped the camera with a towel, and he remembers a man paying cash whose hands were clean, like a person who worked with clean things, boxes, not engines. He says the man had a scar at the base of his thumb shaped like a crescent. Han, who notices bodies like maps, thinks of the rumor. Monday burned a finger on a flare, and writes, "Crescent scar, check Clay, check Joel, check driver lists." They rewatch the check cashing glass reflection, and Han catches a tiny secondary glint in the hazard rhythm. Not the car's indicator, but something smaller blinking within the car. An aftermarket timer module with a tiny LED maybe. Rosales jokes about Morse and microcontrollers and then stops because the joke is instructive. They seize Joel's old Saturn fuse box from the junkyard under paper and find nothing because time is a good criminal, but they learn how a retrofitted hazard trainer could be wired, and in Clay's apartment the toolbox has a wad of clipped wire ends in a jar, red and green and brown, tidy as confetti at a parade no one should have thrown. The Harbor Tide elevator finally hands them a thing they can hold without squinting. The endoscope goes deeper, scratching, and the tech makes a sound like a fisherman with a nibble. The camera reveals a lodged object in a groove where the cage frame doesn't like foreign bodies. They drop the cage, block it, pry, and out slides a rectangle warped by pressure and time. A phone card, dial star, hole unpunched. The card's back carries a smear of something dark, not blood, oxidized soda, and 2 fingerprints that overlap like a Venn diagram of bad decisions. One is partial enough to say nothing. One rides a corner, delicate, a thing you could love. It isn't Elena. It isn't Vera. It isn't Clay. It isn't Joel. It is, in the nameless way new names are, Monday. They parade the finding to the assistant state's attorney like it's a wedding, and she smiles the way realists smile when the world briefly behaves. She says it's still not a body, still not a home run, but it's knuckles on the door. They loop Vera back in and let her look at the card in a clear bag. She stares at it too long, the way a magician stares at his own trick when someone else does it better. She says she doesn't know a Monday. She says if she had a driver, he was a ghost. She says ghosts don't leave fingerprints. Han says, kindly, ghosts love to leave fingerprints because it proves they were here. And for 1 second, Vera's face empties and fills again, a tide that confesses the moon. And then it starts to collapse. The judge who gave them paper gets rotated to a different docket. The manager at Harbor Tide gets a lawyer who moves like a person who bills by breath. A union rep appears with a stack of rights for Clay and a voice like a locked door. Joel stops talking and starts bringing a pastor to interviews because pastors are good at clouding the air with forgiveness and forgetting. The daughter gets sick with a spring cold, and the sister misses a media hit, and the anchors stop calling for 2 days, and those 2 days feel like exile from the only world that holds your person's name. The chief says the word reallocate. The cold case coordinator says triage. The squad room says next heat. Rosales presses 30 pages of narrative into a binder with color tabs and calls it continuation, not surrender. Han packages samples like gifts to the future, labeled so precisely a stranger could step into the story and not get lost. The case does not die. It learns to sleep with one eye open. But the city does not stop whispering to the stubborn. A bus driver the bakery man knows calls the tip line late, breath sweet with cough drops, and says he remembers a woman riding his route that week with arms tight to her sides, like she was holding something inside. He says she hummed a hymn and looked out at the river like it was an answer. He says a man with a crescent scar at his thumb got on 2 stops later and didn't sit, just stood by the rear door like a person who didn't want to crush anything fragile. He's not sure of the day, he's sure of the scar. They thank him, they log it, they underline scar twice, and the night rolls on. In a storage unit hallway with bad art on the wall, a unit door breathes wrong when the HVAC kicks, and a guard who cares less than he looks writes a work order. In a church basement, the vending machine takes a quarter without complaint for the first time in months, and a volunteer laughs and says the machine learned kindness. In the evidence locker, a phone card in a bag leans against a lanyard in a bag, and they look like two birds in a cage waiting to be remembered. This is how cases become cold, not with a final door slamming, but with doors soft closing, with voices turning to paper, with verbs turning to nouns, with momentum becoming archive. This is how stubbornness becomes faith. You keep one thread in your pocket and you refuse to cut it. The thread, for Rosales and Han, is small and metallic and blinks 2-2. It speaks a language that taught them how to listen. The case will sleep, then wake, then run again, because someone will bump an old tape, or a new test will learn a new trick, or a voice will decide it's tired of being the only one who knows how a night smelled. And when that happens, the boards will light, the binder will open, the lanyard will shrug off its plastic sleep, and a name like Monday will learn to be formal. For now, spring, a gust off the lake that clears the precinct steps, a pair of detectives who refuse to learn how to quit. A city that carries unsolveds the way the river carries light. The headline in your head still writes itself like a promise you aren't allowed to read yet. Chicago, 2001, cold case solved. Hazard code, elevator ghost, Monday's print, choir jar, sister's blade, city's hum. The ending exists. It's waiting on a shelf behind a door that knows your knock. The file sleeps for years in a metal drawer that sticks, a drawer that coughs when you pull it, a drawer labeled with the quiet insult of numbers. The city moves through headlines like weather, and the name Elena becomes something you say soft or not at all, unless you are the sister, unless you are the daughter who grows tall enough to reach the top shelf and still finds a mitten clipped to a coat that no longer fits. Unless you are Rosales, who learns new cases like new songs and still hums an old one at the vending machine sometimes. Unless you are Han, who takes a fellowship, learns machines that read whispers and skin cells, comes back with hands steadier than before, and a mind that treats evidence like a stubborn piano you can coax into key. The revival doesn't come with trumpets, it comes with a podcast and a grant and a small miracle of chemistry. The podcast, an anonymous voice, punctuated, precise, the kind of voice that has practiced being believed, launches a series about the riverfront thefts of the late 90s and the women who went missing near the docks. The second episode is titled 2-2 Open, and it says the phrase like a hymn. They interview the sister off mic because on mic makes grief feel like commodity. They mention a phone card and an elevator shaft and a lanyard that remembers a neck. They use the word Monday, and it lands like a dime in a jukebox in a bar full of ghosts. The Grant, a cold case unit with teeth grown back, funded by a city that remembered it owed some names their end